We've been lucky enough to catch up with two legendary mountain cattlemen, Graeme Stoney and Charlie Lovick. Thanks guys for joining us. Tell us a little bit about the heritage of the mountain cattlemen in the Victorian Alps.
The cattlemen in the Alps go back to 1834. Yep. James McFarlane came in from the Monero and settled at McFarlane's Flat before the Henties arrived in Victoria. So the mountain cattlemen are actually the first to settle in Victoria, and that is documented. Yep. Eventually McFarlane went through to Omeo in 1835, is where the actual history started, but James McFarlane was the first mountain cattleman, 1834, in eastern Victoria.
And then they generally moved westward?
Yes, well they discovered the grass on the high plains for the summer, and they gradually moved through to the Bogung High Plains and came through to this area. And of course from Mansfield, they came up the Howker Valley and then up the King and up the other valleys, Jamison, to the grass up this area, which is, I mean, the High Country is a very big area.
Oh yeah, my word. Charlie, how long has your family been involved in the High Country?
Well, as I always said, the old fella followed the gold in, but he was only a young fella. He was only in his very early 20s when William Mitchell Lovick followed gold into the Merrijig area in the Howker Valley in the 1860s. And it wasn't long before his offspring, tending cattle up and down the Howker Valley to feed the miners, apart from building pubs, they seen the escarpment up on top and they would have wondered, what the hell's up there? And over a given amount of time, they forged their way to the top and found a wonderland, another world. And it was them young fellows that wherever they went in the High Country, there was something more to go and explore. And that was the want of those young people in those days that they wanted to go and see what was on the other side of that next mountain. So they were, and then many other young people like them, the pioneers. And it was just a wealth of love for the bush that they generated that sustained them all the way through. They didn't have to get home Friday afternoon. I mean, they get home before the winter.
Yeah, that's right.
And they had to learn when the winter was coming because nobody told them.
Or the dance at Merrijig.
Oh, the dance at Merrijig. All that stuff. So, yeah, the passion is in there and it's been bred into us, people like ourselves, over generations. And we have not only a knowledge but a love for the country. But mark my words, a mountain cattleman is a very competitive person, but he's also got camaraderie. Now, for many years, the Lovicks would say the Stoneys had very poor choice of cattle, not very good horses, couldn't ride much, and no doubt they said the same about us. But I'm sure that we ate more of Stoney's cattle than Stoney's ate of Lovick's. And I have to challenge myself there because their cattle were always skinny, ours were always fat. But anyway, so passion says, and history says, that the camaraderie comes in when there's threats from outside. And as soon as a threat comes from outside, all mountain cattlemen banded together, and that's where the camaraderie comes in, and that is in our blood, and it's still in the passion today for the bush.
Tell me a little bit about the history of. I mean, you were bringing cattle up here for a number of months of the year, 3 or 4 months.
Yeah, the cattle came up in December, and they went back in April, and they grazed here for 3 or 4 months. During that time.
So what numbers are we talking? I mean, how many would you bring up? Right?
We had 300 and 300
and the same, very similar.
310, 300 and what do you have?
Well, that. We brought 310 up, but we always went home with 340.
Okay, because some are Stonies.
Charlie might jest about this, but you always go out to eat your own beef. To quote Jeff Burrows.
That's right. I mean, in recent years, there's been huge changes up here in the high country, and you would have seen all of those changes. Tell me a little bit about them and how you feel about them.
Well, I'll jump in first. It's destroying my soul, because I always believe I'm from this country. I'm born from it, not to it, I'm born from it. It's all I've ever known. My family's the same for generations before, and I will make sure for generations to come. So I've seen a change in my lifetime that no other generation's ever seen. Yeah. And it's purely from the lack of management, the absolute lack of management, Ron. That's the only way I can put it, that people are in charge that don't actually live, understand or love the bush. It is a job.
Yeah, it's funny you should mention that, because we came through the Wonnangatta Valley. Now, I've been coming up here into the Wonnangatta since about 1976, 78, something like that. And I dropped down onto those river flats. I came down Herney Spur, dropped down on those river flats well before the homestead site. And the amount of thin, spindly wattle, the thick forests of it.
Yep.
And this is one of the great changes. It's changed.
Yes.
I mean,
quite a lot of people now are describing it as sick.
Yeah.
The country is sick, and in fact, some of the indigenous people are now starting to say that the country is sick, and they're starting to actually discuss how best to manage it with cool burning, which is something the cattlemen have been advocating for many, many years as well. Yeah. But the present generation of our indigenous people are now starting to try and reinvent and rediscover what their ancestors did for hundreds and hundreds of years.
I mean, of course, that was one of the reasons you guys, all the mountain cattlemen, came into these places, because of these cleared snow plains. And
it's changed.
Yeah.
Absolutely changed.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Dramatically.
Yeah.
And without a word of a lie, Ron, because we're a European background, we learnt about this country from the indigenous population, and they taught us how to burn. And we carried on that tradition for many, many, many years.
And developed our own techniques. It all developed. Like everything develops in this world.
So when were the last cattle taken out of the high country?
Well, it started in earnest in 1989-90 with Bogong. 10 families went from Bogong. Part of our run here at the Bluff was taken. But then the big hit came in 2005 when they took all the cattle out of the Alpine National Park. And it's interesting that in the 06 fires, like this hut burnt down, and there was grass here a metre high because the cattle weren't here, and it was just grass and it was dry, and it just blew the hut away.
Yeah, well, I mean...
It never would have burnt while the cattle were here.
Yeah, the fuel loads in the forest at the moment are pretty incredible, and that's from a person who's sort of untrained in that. Having said that, I've spoken to a lot of people and been involved, but it's incredible how much fuel load the place is carrying.
Yeah. And that's the horrendous change that we've seen in our lifetime. And the bush is not as beautiful as it was. And we come here for its beauty. A lot of people say, oh, you're just making money off the public purse. That is so far from the truth. I mean, you don't make money out of this country, but I was always taught that I have a responsibility to help manage it the best way possible. And as you say, with all that spindly growth through the Wonnangatta, the management is gone. It is not being managed. The fuel loads now are generating. Now, you tell me if I'm not right. There's only two ways you reduce fuel in a growing situation. It's burning and grazing, or both, and both is the answer.
Cool burning.
Absolutely. You've got to get the country, reduce the fuel. If you sit back and do nothing, that's not management.
Now,
It's
Charlie,
not management.
tell them about the way the bushes change colour. That's really indicative of what's going on.
As a bushman, and I do appreciate your passion for the bush, and I've always regarded you as a good bushman. You would have seen the difference in the colours in the bush since the 2003-2006 fires. I always remember those, and through the shooting of Snowy River, the beautiful blues and the greens, the hues, magnificent. You go to those spots now and shoot photography over that, you will see this greyness, which is the dead standing timber as its bark falls off. There's a greyness to it, and it just doesn't look the same. And that is more fuel.
Yeah, it is. On a lighter note, tell us about your time as Master of Horse with the Man from Snowy River movies.
Well, if you go back to that movie, Ron, it says that all the tried and noted riders from the stations near and far had gathered to the homestead overnight. Well, it was basically put on my family to select those riders.
Okay. Did Stoney get a look in or not?
Yes, he was on the cutting edge there for a while. But no, and so all those tried and noted riders that we could muster were brought in. And it was a dill like me as a young fella that tried to marshal them and organise them.
Good luck with that.
Good luck with that. To get them to do what the camera wanted to see. I was one of those silly buggers that thought he knew what the camera wanted to see. So I had to try and convince these unruly ruffians to do what the camera wanted to see, not what they wanted to do. Now that was a job in itself. But in the end, we got the job done. But I would have to say that to get those tried and noted riders from all over the Great Divide to ride together, we'd never done it before. We'd never had the opportunity to ride together.
Yeah, well, independent souls as well, tried to get them to...
It was fantastic. We just went for it.
And as I said today, there was nobody from Mansfield that wanted to let somebody from Omeo boot them down the hill. So it was very competitive.
It was fantastic. Yeah, it was
and
good.
we've never looked back.
No.
Tell us about the fishing episode.
Here we go.
Well, I'll start, right? About 1967, Charlie and I were sent out as young blokes to do the mop-up, which is, there've been 2 musters. You blokes get up there and just check out for stragglers. And it was June. And
well, fairly late in the season then.
Drought year, cold, what have you. We came up here together.
I was only 17 at the time.
And like Charlie had to ride 15 miles to the end of his run, and I had to go a bit closer. And we just camped here. Charlie headed off, and I was on Playboy, which is one of Lovick's best horses. And I got out to the Long Spur, which is about out towards where Lovick's hut is now. And I went down the Long Spur, and I got right down to the bottom because we had to do the extremes. And I could hear the river, so I thought I'd just go down and have a look. So I tied the horse up, walked down. Here's a fish jammed in a bit of a small pool. I got a rock, dropped it where he could get out to the bigger pool. Got in and wrestled him and put him on a stick and brought him back to the hut. And he was a big fish. I was holding him up like this and his tail was on the ground. Sort of.
How big?
Oh, quite big. Big trout. A big cannibal, actually, with the jaw.
Oh, the big turned up.
Yeah. And got back about 4 o'clock.
And the fish too.
And the fish too. Got back about 4:30. It was winter time, nearly dark. So I thought I'll just hang this thing up in front of the double doors here in the hut. You see, and I've got the fire going, but I didn't put the light on. And then Charlie arrives, takes a later because he had further to go, and
I mustered more thoroughly.
Didn't find any cattle though. And he
which
walked in the door.
Meant the country was clean.
It was clean. And Charlie walks into the door and walks straight into the fish because I'd hung it up in the dark. He said, "Where'd you get this bastard? I've been out mustering all day and you've been out fishing."
Exactly right. Yeah.
So we cut the head off the fish and ate the fish.
Yeah, my
and
word.
I took the head home and I had it for years. It was a big fish. Yeah. It was, anyway.
But I will tell you, Ron, I smelled a bit of a rat. And I've been out busting my guts all day by myself. And I thought, Stoney, he's gone straight down bloody Can Creek and gone fishing. So I went out and checked his saddlebag. His lunch was still in it, uneaten. So he'd been back here all day.
Not quite true.
Oh dear. Just to finish up, where do you hope things will happen or go in the next few years?
I'm quite pessimistic about the management of the high country. I don't believe the powers that be understand what they're doing. I don't believe that the political pressure from the Greens will allow any sensible management of the high country. In fact, Charlie was telling me as we came up, they've done up the bluff track a little bit.
Yeah, I noticed that.
But they're not allowed to actually go beyond even just get a bit of win of gravel that might have drifted off to the sides. They've got to stay right on the vegetation. That's ridiculous. It's a road. On the main roads in Victoria, you have to drain the water and you have to bring in what gravel you've got.
You got to win it.
You can't bring gravel from Mansfield up here. You have to just win just the dirt at the edge of the road, which was disturbed soil anyway. But the authorities are saying, no, you can't do that. You've got to redo the road within the road, but the vegetation's coming in. So it's almost impossible. So you've got this philosophy that is actually, quite frankly, crap and not assisting access by the people that want to come here, all the four-wheel drives, all the good people and their families that want to come and enjoy this hut, enjoy Charlie's hut, enjoy the high country, enjoy four-wheel driving. It's really going against tourism. It's going against practical use of our high country.
Yeah. Well, it's a pretty sad note to end on, I guess, but...
I haven't had my say yet.
yeah, okay. Okay.
I never leave Stoney with the last word.
No, well, it's probably a good thing.
But Ron, you know by experience that all cattlemen's huts are left open to the general public. We've always been an inclusive people. We want to spread our knowledge, give our stories, and our huts are always left open for the use of any traveller. And to touch on another note, we talked about the government removed the cattle in 2005. They done more than that. They removed the knowledge of the country at the same time.
Maybe a little bit of the soul as well.
Absolutely, yeah. And people should remiss and talk about that and say, hey, is this right or not? Yeah.
On that note, guys, I think we'll call it quits. Thanks very
Thanks,
much
Ron.
for your
And
words.
Ron,
Thank you.
Ron, you're also a legend up here. And you're welcome here at our fire anytime.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thanks, guys.
Go on,
Thank
yeah.
you.